I'm going to open the discussion. So thank you for coming, gentlemen. Good afternoon, Dr. Campbell, and good afternoon, Dr. I was going to say Dr. Fid, but I want to speak it back into being art. I want to speak it back into being. I want to speak it back into being. Yes, man.
Professor Fid.
Yes, man. He's a professor, you know. I didn't know.
Of course.
No joke about that. There's no joke about that. You know, so a pleasant afternoon to you and you know, the entire team. I know from JCS NY and otherwise. So I'm really happy for us to start this conversation this afternoon. Now, but before I jump into it, I can tell you this. Here in Jamaica, there is an educational transformation committee led by Professor Orlando Patterson, who is at Harvard University. I don't know if he's still there or if he's retired, but you know, I know when the Prime Minister had actually engaged him to lead Jamaica's educational transformation in 2019, 2020, University of Technology Jamaica was a part of it along with other institutions. And they are supposed to play a pivotal role as it speaks to how we need to pivot in this time. Now, the interesting point I want to make before we jump in is that that committee was formed before COVID, seeing that there were needs in the traditional system for change. But since the pandemic, I am going to argue that this committee's need is more than urgent, based on where we are in 2021. As a precursor to this conversation, I don't want to put up too many things, but I had a quick review of the Inside Higher Education Report 2021. There was a special survey report that is suggesting, you see, gentlemen, that in the United States, for example, it appears that because of this pandemic, we have 2 or 3 more pandemics in higher education. And the pandemic has to do with the fact that you're going to be losing students from the traditional institutions that has its own pandemic. You're actually facing another situation that in losing students due to low enrollment or changed enrollment, you are also seeing the pandemic of a workforce that the universities or the colleges may not have properly prepared for. And it begs the question as we jump into today's conversation on Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership. What exactly are we entering into? The Higher Education Report also says that there is a high degree of uncertainty relating to the future of education. The role of leadership in education at this time might be the best thing, and for some, they may say it is the worst. But today on Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, we are going to expound on these particular concerns. You know, I would like to thank Mr. Arthur Fid from JCS New York for joining, and I'd like to thank my co-host, Dr. Arnett Campbell, for all 3 of us here to start this conversation. And for those in podcast land who will pick this up on a weekly basis, thank you as well for your continued comments that come in as a part of this podcast. So gentlemen, I don't think my deck is actually exhaustive. We're going to have a free-flowing conversation about this. And in the morning, I actually have an educational transformational meeting to attend of the university. But let's get from your perspectives as 2 seasoned practitioners, what exactly is educational transformation in 2021? And can I start there? What does this really mean? And all my preamble just now, I don't know if it was in vain, but let me hear your perspective. Yes, about this view. Yes.
I guess I'll go.
Yes, sir, Art. Yes.
Hi guys. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm actually driving, but
very well. Boy,
you know, fellas, I here's how I look at it, right? So in academia, all 3 of us on this call and many of our colleagues are training the next group of business leaders to manage change. And one of the key important things for a change leader to understand, regardless of the industry or sector, is knowing who your customers are. And first, accepting that you have customers. Once you go down the path of recognizing that you have customers and therefore you must provide your service based on the affinity preferences of your customers, i.e., when we go to a supermarket, whether it's Walmart or Megamart, there are some customers who will pay by cash. And so you have to have a cash lane, right? That's their affinity. There are some customers who will use a credit card, and so you have to have a credit card lane. There are some customers who will come and shop for 2 items, and they need a quick in and out, so you got to create that, 2 items or 5 items or less lane. And there are those customers who just want to do it themselves, self-service. Can you imagine then, fellas, if the supermarket of today were to simply be so arrogant as to say, nope, 15 aisles, all cash. Imagine what would happen. So when you take a look at academia, it's the same concept. I believe that for far too long, the universities, the educational institutions have not seen or looked at the students as their customers. And the minute you start doing that, like supermarkets, like retail outlets, like banks, you start asking some tough questions. To what extent am I meeting the affinity of the learning needs and preferences of my customer base? If you start doing that, then you'll start realizing there will always be a group of students or customers who want to sit in a room, in a classroom, in a lecture hall, physically. But there's a whole bunch of them who don't want to sit in a classroom. In fact, there are a whole bunch of them who don't learn a thing sitting in the classroom, but you get them online in a virtual environment and suddenly they're transformed. So I think, cut a long story short, it's not an issue that's specific to the education or academic environment. It is, quite frankly, recognizing that you offer a service and the service is offered to customers, and you must now adjust your delivery framework to meet the affinity and the needs of those customers. So it's really a recognition of that first, in my mind.
That's an excellent point. And in this time of education 4.0, where we speak about, credential stacking, the education market, that lane in the supermarket, as you put it, you can choose which options you want to buy. So it's a nice way to define really what you call transformation, given that the academic system traditionally has been built on what's the word I'm looking for now? Has been
a cash only checkout.
A cash only checkout. A tuition. Many of them are tuition driven models, as opposed to tuition driven models full stop, because endowments versus paying professional fees could be seen as some level of alignment. So this is an important step back. Dr. Campbell, you share this view?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, Art. I share your view entirely, and I have a little bit to add to what you have to say. Education, a product, education as a service. What is the real purpose of education in a society? It's a question that I have grappled with for many years as I seek to define even my own role as a participant in the process. I recognize, for me, I recognize that it has been so if we want to say brick and mortar, it has been so cast into concreteness, so inflexible. It has not been recognizing the changes that have been happening for so many years to suit the society. For example, I have been, sometimes Sean and I have been talking about how do we adopt our education to fit what is happening naturally in our society. For example, we often speak of males being underrepresented in the educational outcome in terms of how we measure progress. And we recognize that, okay, a lot of the males tend to want to be practitioners. They want to go off and practice what they do best. They learn by doing, and but there is not a formal way of recognizing their skills. And even though they have achieved, even though they have built out new lines of businesses and are active participants in the growth of the economy, they are not recognized for it because they are being evaluated in the traditional sense. So for me, transformation has to recognize these changes and to pattern and match what happens naturally, and find a way, not net formal and informal, to engage all in the society so that we can be informed, we can be qualified, and we can transform what we know into economic outcomes. Because for me, that's the outcome. For one thing, I always say we are all higglers and hustlers. We do it. Yeah, we're all higglers and hustlers. So I would say to my students, I say, look, we are higglers and hustlers. Some of us are just more sophisticated, so you go to school and you learn the craft of your maths and your English and your economics and so on, and you come and you go hustle it to Mr. Chin or Mr. Moore, etc. And at the end of the day, they give you a paycheck and you spend it. Another person may go and buy, go downtown, and they may buy sweets and whatever, and then they have a model where they retail it and they sell and they make money. Or someone may think of the person who creates formation of wealth by saying, okay, I get up this morning and I look out and I see the sea out there, the fishermen, and I have nothing, and yet they can start with maybe they start throwing out, they may map up pieces of stick and create a little fish pot and just set it somewhere in the quiet brook of the river or in the recess of the sea. They start catching a few fish, they start selling it, then they start to transform that to buy material, and then they gradually grow until they become who they are. I always remember this poem that says, look what I have become. The person who was the shopkeeper, and then they become the justice of the peace, and they become. So it is all part of this. And how do we recognize as a society that we all play this important role, and how education is supposed to recognize and transform these processes so that we can be better as a people.
Okay, so in my interpretation of what you both have said, a simple way in language for some of our people in podcasts, this is really a market. Educational transformation is really about a market where the dynamics of the market is changing, relating to what you're offering as this product or so-called product called education, and what exactly is in that parcel. You might be buying as cash in one market, as Art said, but in another market, you might be using some alternatives to cash. and it may be long term, it may be short term, but at the end of the day, the academic or whatever institutions that offer the education must recognize that things will continually be changing. And since the pandemic, we have seen in a big way that there's been a lot of changes. So I put to you, because I should tell you about, I was on the North Coast earlier today before I came back to this session, and I saw a colleague, we were having the conversation about this, and boy, she made the statement to me that, listen, Thorpe, it's a major fallout. It's a major fallout. But I'll use the course of this evening's podcast to discuss on some of the things she brought to my attention. It then brings me into sharp focus based on today's deck. Is this pandemic then, gentlemen, such that, institutions have to pivot? Because I'm seeing where some may not be pivoting, but do they have to pivot? And what is the type of fallout you really think we are seeing, especially in light of the pandemic, as it relates to this educational market of the cash out line versus otherwise, as Art aptly puts it? What are we seeing as the pandemic that is facing institutions? Or is it just a figment of my own imagination? Everything is okay.
Yep.
Let me just ask you for your views here. Is everything okay, or is this pandemic showing a seismic shift of what the fallout be at this time? I'm thinking, for example, with Caribbean institutions in particular, versus other institutions abroad. And I'm going to allow you to respond in a minute. I can give out a punchline. Many US, EU, and Canadian institutions are crying foul because they would earn a significant income from international student enrollment. And that has actually gone haywire. Let me hear your views on this one. Has this caused a fallout?
Well, I suppose it depends on how we want to define a fallout, because
yes,
you see, I view what we do, at least the three of us, the academic side of the three of us, no differently than I view what I do on my entrepreneurial side.
Okay, interesting.
So to me, we offer a commodity, right? It's called education. Just like I offer a commodity called an engagement ring. And I used to sell my engagement rings through a brick and mortar, like Doc said, for over 75 years, and it was great. And now, because of change, competition, the internet, and yes, COVID, whether I want to or not, I must now meet the change in the affinity of my shoppers. They need me to open new lanes in the supermarket. And so if that's the fallout, then yes, there's a fallout, which for me translates to an opportunity. It's an opportunity to, in business terms, capture market. In academia, we have an opportunity to attract more students because we are no longer bound by the physical realm of geography. In the same way, I can now sell my jewelry and my diamonds to you directly if I choose to in Jamaica. So I think, again, if we don't look at this as a sort of, it's academic, it's academia, it's special, it actually is not. It's a service. And we have to start seeing this as an opportunity to leverage new channels of distribution. Every single thing we teach in economics, business management, statistics, IT management, human resource management, is telling us that we need to treat the very pedagogy that we use as a commodity that must now be delivered via new channels of distribution. So if it's okay to say, hey, sell your sweaters via Instagram, sell your sweaters via Facebook, social media, an e-commerce platform, and yes, your brick and mortar, then we should be selling our educational services in a omni-channel framework driven by the student's affinity. And so I think the fallout, because fallout sometimes, Sean, has this negative connotation. When you hear fallout, you think about the nuclear fallout. There's never anything good about a fallout, right? And if you fall out of a wagon, there's never anything good coming out of that, right? So I don't see anything negative coming out of what's happening. What I see is just a tremendous upside and opportunity for us, the leaders, to embrace and accept the lived reality. Institutions in our region have been doing this for 7 years, right? I have been lecturing online in a hybrid pedagogy for 6 years at the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business.
Yes.
And it's been quite successful. And we have, and in fact, over the past 2 years, 3 years, we've expanded to having students from Guyana.
Yes.
In the cohort. So it makes the point that it's really an opportunity for you to grow your customer base, isn't it, Sean?
All right, so that's a very good perspective, and I think that is something I embrace that position. Instead of seeing the cup half empty, it's best you're seeing it half full. I don't know if Dr. Campbell has a view on that specific concern, but there's the argument right now, even in the local sphere. There's UWI, University of the West Indies, there's University of Technology, and there are many other institutions locally who will contend that in the traditional model of the academic system, the cost of education, as we would have known it, would have been borne either by the students in part, and then there's another part to be borne by the government by way of subventions. That's a traditional model or marketplace for which the delivery of education is given. In the context of the pandemic, where financial resources are becoming increasingly scarce, as put forward by government and the society in general, we're seeing heavy disruptions in the job market. How then can we say, and I'm simply playing devil's advocate here, how then can we say that the academic institutions will in any way be able to sustain or pivot to meet even the new transactional market space of what you just mentioned? Won't it need to shed its weight of what it can no longer sustain? I'm just playing devil's advocate. Will it not need to lay off staff in the various parts? Because that is the argument, that is going all around. It's like a white elephant in the room of the country, and of the countries in the Caribbean too. I put it back on the table. So it's a very good point. That is an opportunity. I will concur. But feeling which persons don't see it as an opportunity where they can pivot, isn't the implications obvious based on the things I just said, or is it not?
Well, what I see is that persons are still holding on to their physical assets. They are not thinking of how to redeploy those assets. They're not thinking that they have not recast what is happening in their external environment. They don't really even know who their competitors are. And it's like they are planning against what they can't see, what they don't understand. And when you discuss with administrators, and I say administrators here because the students have long moved on. They are out there exploring in various forums where they can acquire knowledge, and all they seek from your institution is a certification. And for us as academics, if we continue to fool ourselves into believing that the traditional model will return and that we can define ourselves by just holding on to the past slavishly and not redesigning our product or offering. So what is to prevent us from taking the best in certain courses from different institutions and configuring them in all kinds of ways and branding them and pushing them beyond our shores to replace the traditional tuition model in terms of the numbers where we can achieve economies of scale. I don't see where we are doing those things. So I think strategic planning need to start focusing there. We need to look at how do we use our space to create competitive advantages. So are we using our space for research and development and for creation of new businesses? Or are we just having these massive rooms, still trying to cool them and keep them clean, and not being able to
They're called
attract?
dead malls. They're now called dead malls. That's the terminology I hear they use for them. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
about that art. Dead malls, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know that very well.
But fellas, you know what I find interesting, Dr. Campbell, and Dr. Thorpe is last semester I had a final year cohort, an MBA in human resource management, right? And a couple of them basically in a discussion similar to this said to me, Professor, the university should take some of its own advice. Because I said, Professor, look, you are advising us on our practicum, and we have gone and intervened in company XYZ in Jamaica, and we have successfully laid out a 3-year roadmap to help transform company XYZ, and it's accepted by the leadership team. And included in this strategy is the need to exploit the situation we're faced with by A, considering value-added services, B, optimizing how we leverage our physical assets, our plant, C, opening new channels of distributions and services, D, reducing the need to own things when we could use things as a service. Now, if you take everything I've just said, and then you bring it back to the world of education, which I think, Sean, is at the core of your thesis here. The very fact that I had to, with my colleagues here at Reeds, take a look at the fact that during this last year, right, Sean, we had our best year in 75 years in the middle of COVID.
Oh boy, let me give a round of applause. The best year in 75 years. This is Carrion Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday afternoon. Mr. Arthur Fiddy speaking. You probably need to say that again, and I think we already have it on record. This has been your best year.
This has been the company's best. Well,
Whoa.
2020 was the best year in the history of the company. And it continues, by the way, right? And it's in the middle of COVID, and it's in the middle of what we're talking about, right, guys? The massive transformation. And so for us, to the point I'm trying to make, we realized that physical asset, we had a plan to build, let's say, 10 stores in addition to what we have, which would imply additional human resources, right? You have to hire people. And so what did we do? We said, well, we can't build all 10 of those because that makes no sense because no one's coming. Even if they want to, Dr. Campbell, they're not coming for all kinds of other reasons. but what we found was people are still graduating from high school and they need a ring. Mm-hmm. Guys are still proposing to girls. Mm-hmm. People still have anniversaries to celebrate. Mm-hmm. And so they want a channel where they can still buy stuff. And what we found was there's an increase in the online purchase of our services and products. But now we had to figure out how do we deliver to them because them aren't the people in my physical geography anymore. See, we're on the southeast region of the United States, and suddenly, Sean, through analytics, we saw a emerging market of customers. You know where they were? California. Now, if you know the map, they were on the other side of the country.
Look at that.
So the question is, what do you do with your physical plants? Well, now you have to say, do I need traditional stores or do I need a store that doubles as a distribution center? If you see where I'm going.
Yes.
So in context then, do I need to build another auditorium, another lecture hall?
Yes.
Or do I find a way to as I say in my field, let's sweat the asset. How much more can I get out of this 3-story building that I'm not using anymore, but I'm still paying for? And that's the thinking that we need to start doing. Because maybe there is a way for us to offer incubator facility services on the campus for startups. So there is a place for these people to actually, have a in quotes, an office, right?
No, we're talking.
Right. Why aren't we thinking about that? Because our definition of the product is locked in a last century construct. You see, you have to redefine the product and the service to keep with the times. And I keep saying my favorite word, guys, the affinity of those receiving it, the customers. We have to accept that students are customers. They're not these people who are waiting to be impressed by us because of all of our alphabet soups.
Yes.
They're customers. You know why? They're paying us.
Yes.
And they have an expectation of quality, service, delivery, on demand, when demanded, wherever and however.
So that's an excellent point. Otherwise, what you're saying, is that we will see student attrition. You lose your market. In short.
You lose your customers.
You're going to lose your customers because
period.
Because if the academic institutions, to avert these dead malls that are now developing on campuses, are to really avert that, then suggestions, for example, could mean you have the incubator types build out of services. You could have industrial research labs, which is really a morph of that. I mean, that's something I've actually put on the table here at the University of Technology, Jamaica, in the COVID-19 think tank that we also run in the university to move to that kind of approach. Failing which you will continue to have an abatement in the customer market. The students will go to alternatives, as you said. You're so right. I'm seeing a lot of institutions in the US and elsewhere moving up the distribution channels. I've never seen so many Coursera and courses in all my life. I went on recently just to look, and I'm seeing almost every other institution you can think of who are now pushing through those channels their educational services. And they're not limited to the traditional academic institutions, but others. So this is a very strong discussion we're having here this evening on Caribbean technology thought leadership. And I will agree with Art Fit on these points, and I agree with Dr. Campbell that there's a need for pivoting. There's a need for pivoting. So in stepping back, the question we must then ask ourselves, the three of us here might have the kind of like-minded and I've observed that you can see the cup half full. But what if the leadership in the institution, let's move to that one now. How important then would be the leadership in the institution in pushing these kind of changes? Because in some institutions, the leadership might be stuck in their traditional or old pedagogy ways. They may be stuck in somewhere in a distant past. It's not simply as saying, you know, let's get up and make a change. Some are fearful of change, right? They're probably not bold enough to see that this is an opportunity or have the perspective. What then do you say? And you have to admit that this is a fact globally. I'm not going to say it's only here in the Caribbean. No. What then obtains in terms of where leadership is in that type of mindset?
Well, Sean, I mean, again, because I don't see academic as being anything different than a commodity, a company selling a commodity, right? Yes. What happened? Why is it that Kodak is no longer here? Well, why is it that Toys R Us is no longer here? Why is it that Radio Shack is no? I mean, we can keep going with this. It's the leadership that has decided it's going to stick its head in the sand and just hope it'll all just go away.
Yes.
But guess what? They went away, or they'll get them.
But hold on. Let me stick up in there. I can argue that for a private educational institution, that might be a faster reality than it is where you have the ones that are government sponsored, where the expectation could be that government intervention by way of subvention or increased subvention in times of depression in the market will help to keep them floating. Even in the Inside the Higher Education report that I was reviewing, and I know the same place in the United States there, for example, they're of the view that the government, the Biden's government should be increasing state funding. I think there were some 78% who were of that view and some 48% who were not of that view. So how do you dispel the view then that if the leadership is of that type of thinking, it's a simple magic trick that it will go away, especially for the ones that are nationally funded and government intervention usually leads to maintaining these state-run institutions. Should the government pull themselves out and let the market forces then determine how leadership should drive what is happening? Is that a view as well that is being suggested here? The floor is yours, gentlemen. This is a very good discussion we're having this evening.
Well, for one, I am saying that if government should get out of the way and let the chip fall where it may, because it's only delaying the inevitable. If you keep propping up and you haven't changed the mode of operation, nothing will change. And you know my private thoughts about certain institutions. So many years now, Professor Thorpe, this is not the forum for me to say it, but you know my private thoughts about it in terms of if it's not being operated one way, it's going to become attractive for takeover in other ways.
Yes.
Because if an institution is not fulfilling its mandate, and it's only just window dressing that mandate, then it serves no useful purpose in the end, and just an accumulation of losses for a society.
Yeah.
Which is not going to be sustainable. That's really what you're saying. It's just it's not sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. It can't be sustained because eventually it dies. So it's like having a plant, and you know that the plant have a disease that is affecting its main root, and you're just fooling around with it instead of just taking it out, get a new sucker, put in there, and put that energy and effort on the new sucker and have it grow in 5 years. What that plant could become a new tree, bearing new fruits and all of that, instead of you having to turn the old tree into charcoal. So I'm saying, so you know, that's my thinking. If you don't, someone will change you. If you don't see the necessity for change, change will come from outside, and we'll sweep you out of the way. So any institution, we have so many institutions in Jamaica, but the focus has to be different. The focus has to be, how do we not only produce people who we can assess in the traditional term as being successful outcomes from our academic institutions, but how do we, but the measure of performance, the measure of outcome needs to change. And I say it is the ability of that outcome to create wealth for the society. It has to be that kind of measure. It has to be recognized and it has to be formalized. And once we start doing that, then we can have even more of the males, being participants in that. Until we start doing that, we'll continue to have this anemic level of growth in our economy, and we'll never move beyond that. So as I say to you, and I always look at how do we create opportunities out of what we do. And I go back to basic things that we do in the society. I say we have to keep our water system safe. We have to keep our light and power safe in our houses, in our businesses. Government have and local bodies have powers to regulate and enable the opportunities to flourish by saying, for example, if we certify people to do certain kinds of work, then automatically it creates opportunities for them. The way we create our artisans, our carpenters, our masons, our interior decorators, etc. Why are we producing people who are half-baked and are not at the highest levels of skills, so that they can always produce the best consistently? And excess of those skills we can always take on contracts outside of the country, because people will always have need for the best skills. And you can do that. So just like how the Chinese can come into our country and export those skills to come and do work for us, we can do the same thing. But our education system must recognize it, must transform to recognize what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and fix those.
So against the background of that, but this is a very, very deep conversation. Welcome to Caribbean Thought Leadership, Technology Thought Leadership on a Sunday afternoon. This is July the 11th, and this is episode 9. What I can say, Dr. Campbell, which is a very important point, and it reminds me of something. Leadership is not the institution that needs to change, it's the people. It's the people who sit behind the institution that need to change. Now, when you take a granular look at this conversation from where I observe that you both sit, and we're all sitting here as academics in one sense, we could talk about leadership at the top of the organization, but we could also suggest that in a pandemic, we need leadership at all levels of the organization, such that I'm sometimes wondering if leadership at the top of the organization might be saying, you don't want to upset the status quo. You know, if for example, in a large public university, state-run university, you know, if you have to lay people off or you have to redeploy them, you might have to reclassify them, or you might have to make large redundancy payments. So it's best to keep things stable. I'm just putting the devil's advocate argument into this the same way. These are all nuances of a reality that must be faced. Government might be saying, well, hold on, that's true. You know, I mean, if you go and rock that boat over there and decide to start moving people around as a part of the change management needed, it may cost us. more than it is to change in itself. Is this a valid point as it relates to how leadership should also be viewing change? Shouldn't they be considering those cost factors as a part of the transitioning in the context of the same question? Just
of course.
Yes.
But again, for me, you know, when my students had the discussion with me, this was probably back in, I think, April or May. It was interesting because it's the hypocrisy of what we're doing.
Go ahead.
If you think about it, right? We you know, all right. So one of the courses that I lecture on emphasizes transformational HR. Okay, Dr. Campbell. And one of the core topics has everything to do with performance management, which necessarily gets down to compensation planning, the rewards system. So on the topic of government subvention, while I don't necessarily agree that we should yank the plug overnight because that might cause a heart attack, what I do suggest, though, and I think the government should do, is to do what we do with performance management. They should really go look at what we're teaching these very MBAs to do when they go back into public and private sector as directors of HR, which is to create a meritocracy. And so the subvention should be a direct function of outcomes. And I think Dr. Campbell went there. But it should be tiered. And you should have stretch outcomes where if you hit those stretch targets, you will get an extra bonus, educational institution X. But the measurement criteria and the definition of success can't be the last century version. We're going to have to measure us on our contribution to society, which is a whole story that Dr. Campbell started to touch on. It has to do with the extent to which it can be shown that we are driving innovation. That's a whole discussion with one of your episodes, Sean, on the academia collaborating with the private sector and the public sector, right? The extent to which you want subvention, we'll give it to you, but you're going to have to earn it. And you're going to earn it in tiers so that we don't just create what could easily become this sort of acceptance of mediocrity because you know that Big Brother is always going to bail you out, right? So you know, that's the whole, my view on the subvention thing is we need it, but we can roll it back and we can tie it to outcomes, and the outcomes have to be forward-thinking outcomes. You know, the pedagogy needs to be changed. Well, some of your subvention is going to be directly linked to the extent to which you've transformed your pedagogy, right? The extent to which you have industry leaders on your team lecturing. It's critical to that. We need to measure you on that. And a certain percentage of your subvention will be tied to that too.
Yes.
Because one of the things we have to be careful with, you know, and the world's changing so fast that the PhD that you and I did 8 years ago references some stuff that is, quite frankly, irrelevant.
Dated, yes, you better be running. It's what I call it, the pacing problem.
Yeah, you just touch something that that is like you have a nose on my foot and you kick me in it, man.
I didn't mean to, but I mean, look, I mean, I'm not throwing shades here because I fall in the same group of people I'm talking about, right? So I get to say this, right? You know, but that's the point. And this is why I'm saying the subvention, the bonus, the compensation, because that's how I view this. Subvention is comp, okay? Has to be a direct function of outcomes. Or stop teaching the students that then. Come on. We have students going out to, Sean, doing their practicums right now as you and I are speaking, right there in Jamaica. Yes. And they're giving this advice to some big brands that you and I all know. I can't tell you who they are. Yes. But they're telling them everything I just said. And people are going, yes, we have to rewrite the compensation plan. It's going to be adjusted to meritocracy and the outcomes and the. So why can't the subvention be done the same way to the universities? And we're the ones teaching people that this is how it's supposed to be done.
But you know, you are presented a wider net on where leadership has to be cast, because it doesn't seem to be limited only to the academic institutions, but it's going to go into the realms of government or the private public sector partnerships, to realize that they too have to make those adjustments in order for us to see the kind of alignment within the institutions. Okay, these are all very meritable points. I
just want to add to what Arthur said. The whole idea of even what we teach. I know, just recently, you and I, Shauna, have been looking at how we teach strategy, IT strategy in our curriculum. And we have been inspired by how we see other professors in other institutions rally around the basic theories of strategies and build their courses to fit their institution and their lived experience around their institution, their environment, their reality. And we attempted to do that, and we accomplished that. And the level of resistance that I see from the traditional people who they are seeing it for the first time, it's as if they can't believe it, that it can be done.
But Dr. Campbell, if we read The Prince by Machiavelli, there's a quote in there that says, because of man's incredulity, he's unable to accept anything new until he's experienced it.
Oh boy. So he needs to be bold, man needs to be bold and step forward.
So the only time he knows there's an iceberg is when he hits the iceberg.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I guess that was an iceberg. Great. Now I know there's an iceberg. Now we done told the man 20 miles away, adjust 5 degrees stern, because there's an iceberg.
I like that one. I like that one. It's definitely a drives home the point.
The other funny anecdote I use when I lecture on this topic of change, and again, this Machiavellian point is, imagine if you were Noah building the ark in a desert, and the brother comes up, Noah, what you doing? Building an ark. Man, why are you building an ark, man? It's the desert. It's not going to rain. And Noah says, oh yeah? Wait. And you know where that story ended. So we are wired that way, guys. Don't be surprised. We're wired not to accept anything until we have personally experienced it.
It's
just who we are. So that's par for the course. I don't even dwell on that, because that's man's nature. So what you have to do is we have to become bold. And that's what we're teaching our MBA.
Yes, you have to be
bold.
So, yes. I think that's the main point, because even within a large organization where there are different tiers of leadership, and you could have one sector of leadership who is resistant to change, or another sector of leadership who wants change, you have to be bold to do the small things that add up, or the big thing that adds up, whichever way you see it, to make those transitions. Because as you correctly said, I'll give you a use case. It might mean that you're running a unit with 50 staff or 100 staff. The staff has no work to be doing now in the traditional sense. You might have to pivot them and let them offer call center as a service, or provisions as a service to a public or to a community, which was never on the cards before. And even then, the same teams of people you heard Dr. Campbell mention might themselves be resistant to the change, even in this pandemic, and not see the opportunity of where this could be going. Listen, man, this is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership 101 on a Sunday, July 11. I take the point, gentlemen. It is very important that in order for us to actually have leadership and leadership change, we have to be bold, and we have to cross the concerns tied between the private public organizations that also need to be driving this change. It may come in small shocks though. And then the question might be, boy, how long will it take for the shock to really reach in terms of impact? I mean, inside a higher education 2021 report says it may take up to 18 years, Art and Dr. Campbell, 18 years for some of the transitions to be seen as to what we are talking about. Do we have that length of time to be waiting, or is that just
well? But Sean,
yes.
it's not that we're waiting 18 years.
Yes.
When you started, it might take 18 years.
Yes.
It's not a matter of let's wait 18 years to get started. I mean, that's not how I would look at it. I would suggest that change is, and we need to start looking at this thing as a journey and not a destination.
Okay, that's
and if
point.
I might, I'm probably going to just make some t-shirts and just says change is and stop. That's it.
Change is. I like that. I like that.
It's extant. There's the word. It exists. It's not an event. And the reason we get caught is because we're all waiting for the event to happen, not realizing we're actually caught in a continuum.
It's a process.
Right. And so, and again, how is it that all of our academic leaders can give opinions on how private sector leaders should change their organizations to drive a competitive culture and a competitive marketplace, hence leading to a competitive country? How is it that we can opine and pontificate on all of the best practices? And we teach our MBAs and MSCs all of the tricks and trades. And we turn around and we don't do them.
This is a very strong conversation on a Sunday afternoon, July 11th.
The MBAs turn to us, Sean, and they look at us, you, me, our colleagues, and say, "Ye hypocrites! Like, what are you guys doing?"
Yes.
So we need to wake up, right? Because sooner or later, no one's going to listen to us anymore.
That's right.
Everyone's going to get hip to what's going on.
That's right.
And so all I have to say again is, like as it is in the case of Kodak.
strong
Toys
case.
R Us, right?
BlackBerry,
BlackBerry. So you got some local ones too, right? That the universities will go. Many schools have closed, by the way.
No. You start to hit a corner there. Yes,
and many are merging in an attempt to survive.
No, you're talking. This is where the conversation is going this afternoon on Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership. I'm glad that Art went that direction before I did, because this piece now, and let me step back. Based on that very statement you make, that you have mergers in higher educational institutions, and you might have to have mergers internal to existing academic institutions. Listen, it's a white elephant in the room. So if I ask the question then, what do you think would be the important factors that will drive the change? And the use case that you just gave of the institutions merging, what are some of the factors driving that? I know economics is the obvious one, but what are some of the other factors that you see that will be needing to drive this kind of change in the market? And yes, go ahead, Dr. Campbell.
Well, apart from economics, it does make sense for persons, for institutions to merge based on their competencies.
Yes,
to give them a more competitive position, a better competitive position in the marketplace. So some of these mergers are strategic in nature.
I'm going to play devil's advocate again then. I would say in a technology university, like a university of technology, every other college or faculty should be looking at technology being a part of the core in terms of providing solutions. Locally, we are seeing across the region that tourism has got a hit. We had a conversation casually the other day, some colleagues and I, that where tourism has got a hit. Won't that have an implication on the number of students who will do a degree in hospitality. Won't that have an implication for colleges of hospitality and actually the intake and the push out of students in the years to come, especially if we go through this pandemic? Will they not need to move now to digital tourism as a potential new channel or new market space, similar to what Art is saying? You know, these are questions we put forward, but some of the pundits are saying, hey, that's too early to cast a judgment on what change should be. But I'm saying, isn't it staring us in the face? The markets are contracting. Will you be able to take students in September in the same numbers you had them last year, September, given that there's this market contraction and there'll be the competency issue that Dr. Campbell just raised will be shifting. There'll be new spaces that people will be shifting to. So that's my point on it. But I'm going to assume ignorance that I might have been missing some important factors.
No, but you make a fair point. Today it came out on. I was watching CNBC on the economic news, and they said that the restaurant industry is struggling because the staff aren't coming back. In fact, they're voluntarily resigning. Let me say it again.
Yes.
They are voluntarily resigning their jobs as waiters and cooks and chefs because having had the time to sit back and chill at home during COVID and really think about the equity or the inequity between what we do for a living and what the man is paying us. They've opted now to leave that and learn something new, upskill themselves. And the restaurant industry now is struggling to find people to the point, Sean, some restaurants are offering $1,500 US sign-on bonus.
What are you saying? And that's a shift, that's new.
So you talk about a fallout. Well, one man's fallout is another man's opportunity. Another man's sign-on bonus, right? So, somebody just made 15. But the point is, but to me, this is the beauty of the whole market, though.
Yes.
We have to put academia in the same economic marketplace where we put our banks and our retailers and our consumer products, services companies. We have to sit in there because we offer a service. Unless we don't think we offer a service, then we have a bigger issue, right? Because then we shouldn't charge for it.
Yes. So this is answering the question naturally from the Keynes. I mean, I can't tell when last I did any economics, but the Keynesian model of market dynamics, demand and supply. So you're saying when enrollment numbers are going down, what you have to then do for those institutions that are in markets that are no longer offering what is relevant, they will have to merge with other players in the market, other educational institutions in the market to provide a service which is still relevant. You will have to look at what exactly are the skills-based competencies that you are providing as an institution. I mean, us in the technology space may boast quite elaborately that technology is a mainstay, is mainstream. We could argue that, listen, if technology is adopted into every other space, it may breathe life into those spaces that could be dying for them to have changes. Do you think technology then is an important factor in the drive of this change? And in the context of an academic institution, how you see that panning out itself? Because my colleagues are saying if technology becomes the mainstay, it therefore means that all other colleges and faculties may now become a part of the technology faculty, as opposed to each of those entities operating organically on their own. Any thoughts on that, if the point is understood?
Well, I don't necessarily think that they have to merge.
Yes.
What I think they need to do is to collaborate and to see how, for example, digitization is going to affect what they do in terms of so if I'm in business, for example, and the traditional way how business have been taught, then there are many opportunities now to have those students practice the creation of businesses, become entrepreneurs, and operate in the virtual digital space where they are creating businesses as an outcome with their graduation. So when you measure them, their diploma will be how successful they are in creating these kinds of solutions or services. I would call it whatever as a service. They create those kinds of products. Yes.
WAAS.
So they, right? So we look at health now.
Oh yes.
How do we infuse technology into the curriculum? So
yes.
we talk about telemedicine and telehealth and all those variants of the curriculum that they're talking about there. Then we need to see much more than that in terms of how they collaborate with a faculty of computing, for example, to better understand the technology and to adopt these technologies into their curriculum so that their graduates are not just fit for a traditional mode of operation, but can operate with big, large data sets, learn now how to research in a different space. So, for example, before when you ask them to test on samples, how they would do it, how they recruit participants versus how they do it now in a virtual space, how they work with data set that is out there and that is available for them to research on. They may not know how to do so. So they need to work with so there needs to be a lot of collaboration internally. And in some cases, you will recognize that some of these bodies within an existing structure may just have to go because they have become redundant. To become more efficient and to focus on what the institution does best. And I also think that institutions need to focus on what they do best and be the best at it so that they create that demand for what they do. And don't just try to do everything because we are called a university doesn't mean that we have to go and start a school in every possible area.
Exactly.
Doesn't right? But truly focus so that we are known for what we are known. And I think last 2 weeks I made a comment about Jamaica being, from I was born, I've always looked at Jamaica as being a country of traders. And I'm saying, why couldn't we have developed the best university in international trade? Why wouldn't we have the best lawyers in international trade, developing the policies and influencing the policies on the global stage? And literally anybody who wants to create businesses globally would have to come to us for those kinds of skills. The consultancy, they would have to come to us for those kinds of skills. And literally now we create virtual salespeople who would be so versed in use of platforms and technology to sell anything basically, just by connecting the supply chain, the value chains, whatever is needed to create the business. So I'm just saying, what if you can dream it, you can make it happen.
Yeah.
And
this is excellent conversation on a Sunday afternoon, Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, where this is actually a podcast that people will actually see and review at end. I have here this afternoon Dr. Arnett Campbell, who is my co-host and co-founder of this particular Technology Thought Leadership. and my ever thankful guest of Mr. Arthur Fidd, president of JCS New York, Jamaica Computer Society New York chapter, and CIO at Reed Jewelers, with several other hats that he wears. You know, and I'm seeing TJ Hewitt, one of our lab technologists from the Dome campus, a particular location which I know would have to manage opening and closing its doors to the public as well at the University of Technology. Thank you, TJ, for joining us. So this is a very, very good conversation.
I think you have another participant there as well.
Did I miss someone? My apologies there. Oh, Kaijo. Kaijo, I know when I saw Campbell come into the room and I thought I was letting you in twice. But I didn't realize. Kaijo, thank you as well for coming. Like father, like son, yes, indeed, of the same block. So thank you very much for coming in. But Art, you made a point earlier, and I probably wanted you to elaborate on it. You're making reference to the fact that there are institutions locally that have really had to make some of these changes. You know, they have had to make some of these changes specific to probably some of them merging, probably smaller schools merging. I don't think we in the university have spent enough time assessing those type of surveys, you know, but I will agree that they may be happening. You can make reference to any, not necessarily only in Jamaica, but probably across the region that you are aware of or that you are seeing generally.
Certainly there are, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you quite well, yes.
There are a number of papers out there
yes.
and primarily you see it in the scientific arena.
Communities, yes.
Where, you know, whether it doesn't necessarily merge, but there's strong collaboration going on between MIT and the people at Dartmouth, between Harvard and Stanford, right? So all of these institutions are actually collaborating, and again, you see, the day our academic institutions, and by that I mean colleges and universities, okay, that's kind of where my focus is, right?
Yes, indeed.
The day that we start to understand how a private sector for-profit entity operates, will start changing a lot. For example, saying we're competing institutions and therefore means we can't share resources, to me is a last century concept. So that's for example, let's say University X in Jamaica has this really big supercomputer that is underutilized and has CPU cycles to give, and University B needs infrastructure to run a ton of cybersecurity simulations.
Yes.
Why wouldn't University B have the ability to work with University A and gain economies?
Great point.
Right? This happens in the real world. As we speak, I am rolling out a platform as a service, a whatever as a service, to use Dr. Campbell's new metaphor, right? And what it's going to do, it's going to allow me, through my company Reeds, to amalgamate diamonds from all sorts of diamond mining suppliers from around the world into one gigantic big data diamond database. And then not only will Reeds sell from that database, but we're going to allow our competitors, other retailers, will now sell diamonds from my database using my APIs. So we compete, but we collaborate at the same time.
Same time.
So this happens daily in the private sector, the non-academic.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
So again, it is time for us to rethink what exactly that we're doing and how we're doing it.
Great point. Very great point. As a matter of fact, on that same cybersecurity example you just gave, UTech had to make a submission to the Joint Select Committee on us setting up a sandbox, a legislative sandbox, regulatory sandbox that will allow us to do some of those digital innovations of which you speak in this time. It went to cabinet, to Parliament last week, Thursday. So it's an excellent point indeed, that we have to now step aside and do this kind of collaboration.
And Sean,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
have to, the heads of the universities, first, you're going to look within to say, what are we going to have to do different in terms of the services? One, we're going to have to necessarily stop being a jack of all trades. And I think
Yep.
Dr. Campbell went there. So in
Yep.
tough times, I used to be told when I was a kid in Jamaica, you have to ban your belly.
Yes.
You
Still
understand?
say. Still
All
say.
right. So
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, look, you have to find your core competencies as a university. Same thing we say in corporate anywhere when we're trying to transform, you know. So you're gonna have to get rid of the ball and chain and focus on
Definitely.
your core. So that's a necessary fallout. And yes, it means some people will colleagues won't be there anymore.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but you have no choice because the forces of the market are telling you this must happen. Now you
That's
could
right.
ignore it and eventually go the way of Kodak. I keep repeating it.
Yes, Kodak is a perfect example.
You know,
I
Toys
need to
R
bring
Us.
it up in tomorrow's meeting. That I have that meeting tomorrow. This is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership, where this evening we're talking about educational transformational leadership and the future of work and the space of work. You know, colleagues, you know, it is a very potent discussion. Very important discussion. You know what is being suggested here, Art and Dr. Campbell and Kaijo and TJ? What it also means is that the future of work is heavily technology and, well, I said, data-driven, highly data-driven. So if it is highly data-driven, it therefore means the transformation or change must occur around that, and it therefore means that an academic institution has to be seeing itself as a data-driven type institute. It has to see itself that way if it's going to survive. So it's some very useful points you're bringing to the table this evening. So the factors that drive the change are many, from the market force of the numbers, from the market force of what are the skills alignment that the market is looking for, from the attributes of shedding what you are not your core competencies, and focusing on those specific elements that will bring you to that outcome. The inhibitors, of course, are those who are stuck in the cultural realm and potentially the social realm that, listen, this will not affect us, you know, we are entitled, etc. Those may be the inhibitors, and it's going to be there for a while. But I take Art's point that, like in change, it's a process, so let it flow its time. So these are very important points that you are raising.
Sean,
yes,
if I
go
may,
ahead.
let us not forget that each of us in our audience, when they listen to this, will agree that if you go to the restaurant and you don't like how the waiter talked to you, and you don't like how that drink was made, and you don't like how the fish tastes, you're not going back.
That's right.
So if I go to an educational institution, I don't like how the professors deal with me. I don't like the fact that they're always unavailable. I don't like that the admission process is manual. I don't like that after I do my finals, I wait 4 months to get my grade. I'm done. I'm not coming back. Why? It's my money. And I think we don't get it that we have customers. It's, you know, there is a concept that we teach in our MS program for information systems management about the 4 cardinal sins affecting good customer service from an IT manager's perspective. And you know what number 1 is? Number 1 is not realizing that you have customers.
That's so true.
And I would suggest, now here is academia teaching this to the future senior CIOs, right? Of how to transform IT to be more service driven, more customer driven. We're telling them this, but then we also still refer to these people who pay us as students. Language is powerful. Words have meaning. If we start treating them as customers, it means we now have someone who's holding us accountable to deliver a quality service, which changes behavior. And that's how transformation happens.
So the accountability component definitely must come in to change. I think that's a fundamental point. The fact that persons have to be accountable at all levels will change behavior, and the market force will drive it there. You are so right.
Of course.
This is a powerful conversation we're having this evening. Might be a few of us in numbers, but listen, few but very important and quality points. So gentlemen, all if you step back, and probably Kaijo may want to weigh in because as an MBA grad himself, and TJ also as an MBA grad himself, what are you seeing comparatively across regions? It could be local, it could be elsewhere in terms of what leadership is doing in this regards. Can you highlight, from where you see, probably I could say University of Maine. Let me ask Kaijo in the context of the University of Maine, where he's at now. What is happening from your perspective or lens, Kaijo, as it relates to how leadership there, university leadership, is treating with the university? As a matter of fact, your president is quoted in the Insider Higher Ed report. I'll tell you what he said afterwards. But let me hear from you, Kaijo, the perspective of what you see leadership in the university at that location is doing to make change a reality.
Well, during the pandemic, what they had done is so the university is primarily focused on research. So what they ended up doing is using some of those researchers to find ways of keeping the institution running during the whole pandemic. So we didn't have to really shut down. What we did, we moved to a hybrid approach and did frequent testing and so on. So we use our own students to help with the testing processes and other things to keep the cases low and keep the university open. So those are some ways that they have adopted and use what they have to keep everything going. And in case of anything, so example, this September, the university is opening back almost full capacity, but they're able to continue. Even if the pandemic worsen again, they would be able to adopt further again. And what they do, they have the leadership has town hall meetings with the students to find out what is happening, what do they need, etc. So like, for example, during the whole pandemic, students were concerned about their GPAs. So what they ended up doing is allow them the ability to, instead of dropping a course, they would just convert it to a pass-fail and continue the course and pass it and not affect their future, so that they learn as much as they can instead of just dropping it and having to do it all over again.
And you know why that makes sense? And that's such a powerful point. University of Maine sees them as customers.
Yes.
Period. Yes. If you go and ask the provost, Mr. Campbell and his fellow colleagues are customers of the university, and you go the extra mile for your customers, don't you?
Yes.
If you want to keep them. It's fundamental.
So that's fundamental, because I know the president of the University of Maine indicated that you have to make bold, discerning moves in times of uncertainty. I remember that very well, his comments in my recent read of the Insider Higher Ed.
It's a she.
It's a she, sorry, it's a she. Right, but I want to take this argument one step further in terms of the scan of what leaderships are doing. I've been learning that in many of the institutions abroad in particular, they have stopped hiring, or they have stopped tenuring faculty at this point. So in other words, they are not necessarily hiring new faculty and putting them through the tenure process. It may be a cost at the university at this time. For those who do get that type of hire, they may be sponsored, for example, by companies like a Nortel Networks or so on. Is this an observation or a trend that you're seeing, that staff retention or staff hire is changing? Are we seeing shift in those dynamics that the universities are now employing as a means of managing costs and economies of scale? Is this something also seen? But that's what I'm hearing at different points. At Drexel, they're doing the same thing. They're not necessarily hiring new professors. They're literally hiring more adjunct in the process, as opposed to the additional engagement. Okay.
Well, it's funny because someone was asking me the other day, so like, what does retirement look like for you, Professor? And I said, well, the way things are going, I don't think I'm going to retire because I'll just be an adjunct at 7 different universities globally.
Yes, globally, yeah.
Which is a full-time job when you put them together.
You put them together, yes. And I met one chap 2 weeks ago from, I think it's Delaware State University. You know, he negotiates his contracts on a per basis to do the same academic work that is done in the traditional universities here as a part of the engagement. So the models are changing. I guess it depends on the type of institution and the type of endowment and potentially the type of earnings that the professors come in with, vis-a-vis, you know, to say. But that was an observation I made, that leaderships in university is doing. But I'm going to use about the University of Maine again. And Kaja, help me here to understand this as a baseline. Probably I could write a study out of this as a separate point. Is it that the semesters are longer? Is it that there are less administrative staff hired now to support the students? Is there a heavier reliance on technology to support the students? What are some of the bigger things you are seeing in the space as to how students are supported in their tenure at the university that you have never seen before, if you can think of it like that?
Okay. All right. So in terms of how the students, repeat the question again for me, please.
Yes, I'm just thinking, what are you seeing as some, outside of what you mentioned earlier with respect of students being able to take the course over a prolonged period in the semester? Are you seeing, yes, outside of that one, are you seeing other things, major things that, you know, in this pandemic is affecting how the university is now treating with you as students as a learning point?
Okay, so what they have done, some of the major changes that they have incorporated, for example, they have removed the last semester, they have removed, what's it called again? Is it spring break?
Spring break. Oh.
Yes, they removed it. And what they ended up doing is have reading days throughout the semester, so that at different points during the semester, the students could get a break to take a breather instead of having spring break and having students going all over the
spread more COVID.
Yes. They have done
yes.
They have done that. They have also classes. What they have done is, like, for example, mathematics, so like calculus 1, 2, 3, etc. What they have done is that the lectures are done online, but the recitations or the tutorials are in person in a kind of setting where you're in groups that are separated and isolate, you know, socially distant. And what they would do, they would give you some marker boards, mini marker boards that you'd write on and work through your questions and so on. And one of the things that they have done, they have made sure that when you're in that recitation, you don't write notes. So you work the problems and so on. So you focus on learning the material. And also what some professors have done, like one particular professor has done, calculus professor has done, instead of having the live lectures, what she had done, because so you have math Monday to Friday, 5 days. So what happens is that you have lectures Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. What she had done is that Monday and Friday are pre-recorded lectures, and they're broken into sections. And what you do, you watch those videos and you have to do quick 5-minute quizzes, and that contributes to your final grade. So instead of your final being, say, 20% of your final, it is 5% of it comes from those quick quizzes that you have to do. And on Wednesdays, you have the live online lecture where you ask questions and so on, because on Thursday, you have a weekly quiz that you have in recitation in class. So that is a major change that the math department has employed. And a lot of students, including myself, enjoy that form. And I'm hoping that they continue that. So that's one example of how they have adopted.
That's a big one. That's a huge one. So in terms of the tutorials that you just mentioned, you come to campus and do. Is it that the areas are cordoned? They put in a lot of measures to ensure that people stay 6 feet apart. How big are those bubbles? I will call them COVID-19 bubbles. How big are those?
In addition to that, it didn't say, but every week they have to do a COVID test.
Oh, yes. Oh, so every week, sorry about that. So every week you have to go to, so that's what I was saying before, that they have used their own students to help with keeping the cases low. So every week, in order to be permitted on campus, you'd go to one of the centers that they have converted into. So they have 2 centers, one for staff, one for students. You go, you book your appointment, and every single week at that time, you go, they ask a few questions, you walk to different sections, and then they scan the barcode, which checks you in. Then you walk, get your funnel, and you do the test, the PCR test, where you drill inside of a capsule. Then you just scan it and drop it off and you leave. And by the end of the day, they give you results. You have a kind of a status which tells you if you are able to come on campus, if you have been exposed, etc. Now that the vaccines have been rolled out, what they have done, persons who are vaccinated, they can submit that so they don't have to. But if you don't, you have to do it every single week. As it relates to the recitations, how it was before.
Before you get to that, the app was developed by them as well.
Yes. So at first you're using an app by other university, and then they built their own in-house application, so they hold the data and so on within the university.
Interesting. So it's a complete. So the campus is fully resumed in the context of those tutorials and. Okay, so it's well managed in that regard. So that's a learning point. That's a very instructive learning point of what is happening in like your university and so on. Very good.
So they're planning to roll that go back as in person as possible for the next semester. What the point that I was saying about the recitations, normally how it's set up even before COVID is that it's like it's a big room that you have circular tables and you have boards on each side of the room. And so you work, each section may have a group of say 6. And then you'd work together on those points, and you write on the board, you get the questions, you work on the board and so on, even in a lecture setting. But what they have done is that during COVID, they reduced the amount. So the desks are big enough that 4 persons sitting at the different parts of a circular table is about 6 feet apart.
Okay, and departments are not being closed at University of Maine? No department is being closed?
No, they weren't closed.
So all departments are still working. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So they have pivoted. They have pivoted and found a way to pivot. So I think this is a very useful conversation we are having, and we have to have more of it. The leadership in universities, gentlemen, as you have put it quite aptly, will have to step up and understand the market and operate like CEOs in the traditional market if they want their institutions to remain alive.
Correct.
So that's a very useful argument point. So in winding up this podcast for today, there's one more question I want to ask, unless there be any others that you have after, is, the workforce transition that we are seeing coming out of this pandemic. I'm seeing the need for people like healthcare, health informatics professionals. I'm seeing the need for a lot more cybersecurity, engineers, which was there before. But what are you seeing as some of the transitions in the workforce that the universities will need to be paying attention to? Probably digital tourism specialists, I can think of several others. But what are you seeing from where you sit for where the jobs are going and what the universities will need to be doing, or the academic institutions, full stop, will need to be doing to prepare those kind of graduates? That's a general thought there in closing. Anybody can take that one first.
Well, I can tell you that because a result of the new way of working is the fact that more organizations, private sector, consumer products, retail services, banks, and so on, must move to a omni-channel service delivery framework, which means they're gonna have to build out their digital channel, right? The digital bank, the digital store, and everything. And so what's happening is there is a need for persons with knowledge of the rainbow of digital services from PHP developers, e-commerce platforms, specifically Magento and Shopify experience, as persons are going to begin to transact commerce online, as well as persons who are able to do project management in the context of these digital initiatives. There is a need for those services. In fact, I can openly tell you I'm recruiting for those roles right now, because we're doing that very thing. We're building out an omni-channel framework. So it's expedited primarily because, again, there's a recognition that the affinity of our customer base is such that there are more new customers to be had that are outside the physical geographic footprint of our presence than there are new customers in the places where we already exist. And so the only way you're going to get to those people is through a digital framework. And so you need now this new set of experts who understand targeted marketing, geofencing marketing, and all the other search engine optimization techniques, recommendation engines, advanced search engines, and the list goes on, right? So there is a need for those skills. And one thing I want to add, Sean, which is a change that I know we've done so far at Mona SMB, and also at LotJack in Trinidad, is specifically in the MBA courses and in even in the Masters in Information Operations and Management, we're including as part of the pedagogy projects that will allow the students to leave with an understanding of one or more specific tools / applications that is essentially relevant in the space. So for example, if it's HR, I teach with an HRIS platform so that when these MBAs graduate, they would have demystified what it means to implement a new HRIS, because they would have done it in 12 weeks from soup to nuts. And when we're doing the IS courses, we're teaching with a business intelligence tool so that when they leave, they already know how to create dashboards and visualization and analytics. And so I think that that's something we need to do as we look at a pedagogy, is to blend the theory with the practical, but the practical from the perspective of those systems, those applications, those tools that are really being consumed by corporate Jamaica, corporate USA, corporate Europe, if you see where I'm going. We need to strike deals with these these vendors, speak to IBM. Watson Analytics should be a part of any analytics course that we're teaching at your university. If you're going to have a HR graduate, speak with the CEO from Orange HR and have an instance set up for your university and follow that pattern, if you see where I'm going.
Excellent point. Excellent point. I actually was in the Seattle area in 2018 at some meetings out at Microsoft Redmond campus, and I met a professor from University of Puerto Rico. He was the president of that university in Puerto Rico. He was teaching his nursing cadre of students Python programming. Python programming. So I said, why are you teaching these nurses Python programming? He said that he wants them to be fully adaptive as it relates to gaining insights from outpatient care care data.
Correct.
And that left a very strong impression on me. To the point I went back to UTech and indicated the same thing for the students, all 900 of the nurses, to start doing some programming, some Python programming or some C programming, as a foray into what the future of work would look like for nursing.
But Sean, they don't even have to do programming, though. What I'm saying is the tools are there.
The tools, that's correct. That's tools.
So give them, speak to people at Click and get a Click license for the university, as an example. I'm just throwing this out. You don't have to write Python to do analytics. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm just saying
that's right.
The theory is no longer enough. If you want functioning, ready to work, productive people beyond the 3 letters in the alphabet soup, then we have to give them things that they can put on a resume that industry wants. The industry is going to put a job description out there that says, do you have experience working with this software and that software? And if the answer is no, they're not going to get the interview. But if the answer is, not only do I have experience, I did my practicum intervention and implemented it at company XYZ, well, then you're probably going to want to interview that person, wouldn't you?
Yes. So I think one of the failings of the university system in general, especially here in the region, is keeping up with pace of those kind of needs. So like when you indicated the kind of skills you need, that skills bank alignment between what the university should be paying attention to for where workforce transitions need to be noted. It's not very well documented here in the region. As a matter of fact, it's still an open issue for where we have well-defined skill banks that are frequently updated with the needs of the international space for employment, right? And how universities should be responding to that in a meaningful way. So this is a very good set of points that are raised on the issue for workforce transitioning. It's not an exhaustive point, but it's something that we have to keep reassessing based on the programs. What we are being told in the university, or we are seeing around in the university, the traditional student in the School of Business, if they are not tech savvy, there will be no School of Business. Students in hospitality, if they don't understand how to use the data relating to the hospitality profession and metrics for what that data can do, they won't have an opportunity. So every area has data metrics that if the students, the professors, the university is using those metrics, then there will be a lot of scope for growth and opportunity going forward. This is Caribbean Technology Thought Leadership 101 on a Sunday afternoon, July 11th, episode 9. In closing, any final remarks across the board this afternoon? Any closing remarks on this conversation? As a matter of fact, the whole of this week, Art and Dr. Campbell, I think the universities across the country will be in educational transformational leadership forums and sessions. So over time that this is going on, but any closing thoughts you see that the country should be paying attention to at this time? What would be some of your words of advice in closing for national leadership in this particular realm?
I would ask that if you are attending those workshops, you remind them that they must follow the advice that they're giving the students and they should run the university as if it's a private company or a publicly traded company that's measured on a quarterly basis. They need to look at it that way, or it's just you're going to lose your customers.
Yeah, you're playing lip service. Yes.
Well, because remember, the truth is, and I'm not throwing shades, right? But I'm just calling balls and strikes here. There's no reason why all of your students couldn't just register online at another university and get their degree.
That's true.
So I'm just saying, like, it's not true. Like, oh, the competition isn't here, so the local universities have this grip on local customers, local students. Yes. That's ridiculous. Yes. The truth is, students in Guyana, for example, are being lectured to by me at the Lockjack Global School of Business, which is based in Trinidad. They're not going to the University of Guyana. So if you take that point, all I'm saying is the competition is global for our students.
That's right.
So we better wake up. So you should pass the message on, take your own advice that we're giving our MBAs, and run the school as if it's a business that's for profit with customers at the core. That's really what I would ask.
And what advice would you give a school of computing and information technology at this time in terms of its own pivot and transition?
Well, it's the same thing again. It's the four cardinal sins.
Yep.
Not knowing that you have a customer kills CIOs, kills IT managers. So if a school of computing, if you don't realize you have customers, it's the same discussion. It really doesn't matter.
Same discussion.
They are your customers and they have a choice. They don't have to come to your institution or mine. They can just go online right now. And if they want to do a PhD, just go to Nova or go to North Central University and they'll send them a laptop, by the way, just so, and they can get on with their studies.
Right. Yeah. Then point. Dr. Campbell, any closing points on this?
Well, I just ditto what Art had to say. I also will say that you will advise them, if you are given that opportunity, to run education as a business, rationalize the resources, and seek out our competencies and develop those to give us the competitive advantage as an educational product.
Excellent point. I don't know if TJ wanted to weigh in anything on this. I saw him in the chat earlier communicating, and I don't know if Kaijo has any closing points on this, but I think this has been good. All right. So listen, this has been another wonderful week of the whole space of Caribbean technology thought leadership. This week we have been looking at educational transformation. By no means what we have discussed this evening is limited in terms of the activity. Mark, I'll be sharing with you guys a working paper on the whole space of educational transformation, leadership, and the activities that we should be doing here in Jamaica and the Caribbean. It's a short working paper just to get some insights from you based on what we have been discussing this evening and some of my prior thoughts that I have been documenting. This has been a wonderful conversation again, and thank you again for your time on a Sunday evening. 1 week after American independence, right? Art, 1 week
That's
after.
Right.
And
we're still here.
And he's still here. Thankful to God for that, my brother. Thankful to God for that.
Thank you.
So, thank you all, and have a wonderful evening. Dr. Campbell, I'll reach out to you afterwards as well. But thank you, gentlemen, all where this is concerned, and have a wonderful evening.
All right.
Okay.
Stay well, everyone. Bye-bye.
Stay well.